Hi everyone, and welcome to today's video. Today we're looking at fractions and decimals and how to convert fractions into decimals. So let's look at this. Okay, so here we've got 3/4, and we all know that 3/4 is 0.75 as a decimal, but let's look at mathematically how it's possible to convert 3/4 into 0.75. And as usual, we follow, I've got some steps for you, and all you need to do is just follow them. The first step is to rewrite this fraction like this. And the next step is to divide the top number by the bottom number. Now, a couple of very important things actually. The first thing is I normally add an extra 0 there, and you'll see why in a moment. You might need to add more zeros as the calculation progresses, but for the time being I normally just start with 2. And the other important thing is to make sure that this decimal point sits above it like that. So now we can start the calculation. So we can't do 3 divided by 4 because that's just another decimal. That's the original one, isn't it? So what we do is we take the next number and we say, well, how many 4s go into 30? And the answer is 7, because 7 times 4 is 28, and that gives us a remainder of 2. And now here we've made 20. Can you see? So now the next question is, how many 4s are there in 20? And the answer is 5. So therefore 3/4 as a decimal is 0.75. Let's do it again. Let's do 1/8. Okay, so again our first step is to rewrite it like this. Okay, let's start the calculation now. So as you know, we've got to rewrite this so that we're dividing the top number by the bottom number. And I've got my extra 0 here just in case. And I think actually this is the calculation where you will need an extra 0, maybe even an extra 0. But you'll see as time progresses, and then not forgetting the decimal point on top as well. Okay, so let's start the calculation. How many 8s are there in 1? It's not possible. How many 8s are there in 10? The answer is 1. The remainder is 2. How many 8s are there in 20? The answer is 2, because 2 times 8 is 16. Now, because there's a remainder of 4, we're putting an extra 0 there, and there's our 4. Okay. How many 8s are there in 40? The answer is 5. So 1/8 as a decimal is 0.125. So now what I want you to do is I want you to have a go at this one. And remember our rules. Okay, the first rule is to rewrite it so that we've got the decimal point in between the number and the 0, and then divide the top number by the bottom number. And if you're not sure, have a look at the video again, pause this video when I say so, and then come back to see how I've done the calculation, and then hopefully they're the same. Okay, so pause the video now and come back when you're done. Okay, so hopefully you're done, and hopefully you get the same answer as me. So this is how I would do it. So first rule is to rewrite this. The next rule is to divide, I've got my extra 0 there, the top number by the bottom number. So how many 2s are there? Sorry, how many 5s are there in 2? It's not possible. Don't forget the decimal point at the top. How many 5s are there in 20? The answer is 4. And is there any remainder? Nope. So the answer is 0.4. So 2/5 as a decimal is 0.4. Now what we're going to do is we're going to do the opposite. So here we've looked at converting fractions into decimals. So now we're going to go the other way. Let's look at converting a decimal into a fraction. So let's with 0.4. So the first step is actually to turn 0.4 into a whole number, and we do that by multiplying it by 10. Because 10 has got 1 0 in it, this makes this 4 jump over the decimal point one space to the left, and that gives us 4. The next step is to take this 4 and divide it by the number you have just multiplied it by, right? The number that you just used, and that's this, that's 10. And the next step, the final step, is just simply to simplify. So you can divide both by 2, you end up with 2 over 5. So 2/5, 0.4, 2/5, 0.4. Let's do another one now. Let's do 3/4. So we've got 0.75. Okay, so if you remember, we want to turn 0.75 into a whole number. We need to multiply it by 100 this time because it's a 2-digit number. Okay, so because this is a number to one decimal place, we're using 10. Because this is a number to 2 decimal places, we're using 100. That gives us 75. Then what we do is we take that 75, we divide it by 100, which is the number we just used. And then the next step is just to simplify. So we've got 75 over 100. If we divide both by 5, we end up with 15 over 20. We could divide this by 5 again, top and bottom. We end up with 3 over 4. So 3/4 and 0.75. So now what I want you to do is I'd like you to use this method. When I say so, you can pause the video, and I'd like you to use this method to turn 0.125 into its fraction. Okay, pause the video now and then come back when you're done. Okay, so hopefully the first step, if you remember correctly, was to multiply it by 100. Oh, sorry, 1,000 in this case, because we want to turn this into a whole number. So we've got 1, 2, 3. The decimal point's going to jump 3 spaces, or the number's going to jump 3 spaces to the left. And because there are 3 spaces involved, we need a number with 3 zeros at the end of it. So that turns this into 125. The next step is to take that 125, divide it by 1,000, because that's the number we used. And then we just simplify. So we know nobody here knows their, well, unless you're a genius, nobody knows their 125 times table, but I know that both numbers end with a 5 or a 0, so that gives me a clue that they can both be divided by 5. So 125 divided by 5 makes 25. 1,000 divided by 5 makes 200. Again, they both end in a 5 or a 0. I can divide them again. Let's divide both by 5. You end up with 5 over 40, and you can divide them by 5 again, and you end up with 1 over 8. Okay, so if you got that, that's brilliant. If you didn't get it, go through the video again, and if you're still not sure, come and ask me, and I'll be happy to explain.